Dhananjaya Prabhu, all the way from UK.
Hare Krishna, everybody. First of all, I'd like to thank His Grace Nrsingananda Prabhu for giving me the opportunity to come here today. And there's so many exalted Vaishnavas present. So I'd like to, first of all, beg your permission to say a few words. I'm not at all a scholar. I'm not a philosopher. I don't have any books published in my name. I never kept a diary, but somehow or another, Krishna's blessed me with, especially regarding details of many activities that happened decades ago. And my coming to Krishna consciousness, I was given, you can say, 12 years advance notice that something special was going to happen. I was only 9 years old, and I had a premonition that on my 21st birthday, I would have a tremendous religious experience. And little did I know that my 21st birthday coincided with the very first Jagannath Rath Yatra festival held in London. That was on the 27th of July, 1969. And that was also the first day that I chanted Hare Krishna with an open heart. I'd met the devotees several months previously, but I never felt any connection with them. In fact, I really wasn't a very good candidate. I kept moving across the street. If they were coming down some street somewhere in London and I saw them, I would try to get as far away as possible from them. Because a friend of mine, he had gone to a Sunday love feast which was held in what's now known as Covent Garden. And he came away completely intoxicated. So he was absolutely convinced that the devotees had put in some drugs in the food. Of course, he was intoxicated. Why? Because in those days, the main cooks were Yamuna and Malati and Janaki. So he was intoxicated by their devotion. But I was thinking, my goodness, these people are a bit crafty, not to be treated, you know, openly. But we have to be very careful with them. And so that's why I kept my distance. But as I said, because I had this premonition, I went along to Marble Arch in London to participate in the beginning of the Rath Yatra festival. And by Lord Jagannath's mercy, I was invited by, who I got to know is Purushat, his name is, oh my goodness, I've forgotten his name. Trivikram from Buffalo, New York, who was Prabhupada's official chauffeur, and also he officially massaged Srila Prabhupada. This is in 1969. So he invited me to help push the cart, because we were having some difficulty in getting it started. But unfortunately, because the cart was made up of donations, there was nothing purchased. The wheels came from Covent Garden, from old fruit and vegetable wheelbarrows, and they were full of dry rot. So after this cart trundled for maybe 150 yards, the spokes on the wheels disintegrated. And so the cart couldn't move any further. So they made announcements over using microphones that they would continue the procession to Trafalgar Square without the cart. And they invited everyone to please chant Hare Krishna. So I did that, and we went all the way down to Trafalgar Square via Park Lane, Piccadilly Circus. And so when we got there, already there was a couple of ladies that were leading kirtan. In fact, I was told there was Jamuna and this Indian lady, and they were singing together. Her name was Shamama. And they were playing mridungas and singing. And their voices were so melodious and so attractive. I stayed. Then there was a little talk by Gurudas. Then Mukunda invited anyone who had any experience in painting and decorating to please come forward, because they were looking for help with their new temple, with the renovation of that new temple. So I came forward and I asked Mukunda, where is this place? And he said, well, we're not giving out the address. I said, that's really funny. You're just asking for volunteers, but how do we get there? He said, well, we'll come to you. You don't come to us, we'll come to you. At that time I was living in Finsbury Park, which is a suburb of London. And Kulashekar, this English devotee, came. And he came like the next day to invite me down to the temple. And so we went, and he was really enthusiastic about putting on this LP of Srila Prabhupada singing. That was the recording on the Happening label, recorded in New York in 1967. So when I heard Srila Prabhupada's voice, I knew instantaneously that I'd known Srila Prabhupada in the previous life. And then when he spoke, I listened very intently to his accent, and Kulashekar was noticing that, and he said, are you having difficulty in understanding his accent? I said, no, quite the opposite. I can hear everything very clear. In fact, there's a little bit of an intonation of a Scottish accent. At that time, of course, none of us knew that Prabhupada went to Scottish Church College in Calcutta. And I think the reason that Prabhupada, you can say, felt close to me was that when he was the Indian student, all his teachers were Scottish. But there were reverse roles in England. He was the Indian teacher, and I was the Scottish student. So my claim to fame is that I'm Srila Prabhupada's first Scottish male disciple. So on that note, I'd just also like to mention that sometimes devotees, they're wondering, should I be known as an American Hare Krishna or just a Hare Krishna? Because after all, Aham Brahmasmi, I'm not this body, I'm pure spirit soul. So is it wrong to think of being a French Hare Krishna or a German Hare Krishna? And it was in 1975 in Vrindavan that Prabhupada called me to his room, and he said, I want you to go to Manipur. Does anybody know where Manipur is? Have you been to Manipur? Yes, yes. And so I kind of geographically knew where Manipur was. It was right up in the northeastern part of India, the easternmost state of India. In fact, it was the other side of Bangladesh. And Prabhupada just made me temple president of the Vrindavan temple, the Krishna Balaram Mandir. So I was thinking, why does he want me to go there? Have I done something? Have I made some offense to him? So I asked when he told me, so I want you to go to Manipur. I said, why Srila Prabhupada? He said, because during the British rule, so many Scottish missionaries, they went to Manipur and they converted the local Manipuris into Christians. So he said, you, and he pointed his finger at me, he said, you are a Scottish Vaishnav. So you go there to Manipur and you reconvert all these Manipuri Christians to being Vaishnavas. As far as I can remember, I was the only devotee that was given that instruction. And of course, Prabhupada wanted to go there himself. In fact, he was so enthusiastic that I should go there that he summoned Sarup Damodar. He was a brahmachari at that time. Of course, he became Bhakti Sarup Damodar Swami. But he was Prabhupada's first Manipuri disciple, very intelligent person. And in fact, Prabhupada made him the head of the Bhaktivedanta Institute. He was a scientist of repute, and Yogeshwar Prabhu was showing that photo where there's a group of scientists who had been awarded the Nobel Prize with Sataputta. And actually Prabhupada wanted Srila Damodar and Sataputta and some other scientists to work together to establish this Bhaktivedanta Institute. So he told Srila Damodar, you look after Dhananjaya, you go with him to Delhi, you meet the local MP for Manipur, his name was N. Tombi Singh, and you try to help that he gets his, what in those days was known as an entry permit. Although Manipur is officially part of India, it's very difficult to go there. You have to apply to the, it's called Ministry of Home Affairs, and it's actually a restricted area. And I applied along with a letter from the local MP and also a letter from Srila Damodar. And I never received a reply from the Ministry of Home Affairs. They had my photograph, they had my application form. And it took me 16 years until I got the opportunity to visit there. That was in 1991. And at that time I was residing in Mayapur. And they gave me 5 days. 5 days. Visa, you can call. So that was not so easy to follow that particular instruction given by Srila Prabhupada. So in 1969, Prabhupada flew from Hamburg to London Heathrow Airport. That was on the 11th of September, 1969. And that was the very first time I actually physically saw Srila Prabhupada for the first time as he came out of the plane. And at that time, we were living at the home of two very famous people, John Lennon and Yoko Ono, at their estate called Tittenhurst Park. And it was through the agency of George Harrison, he asked on our behalf if they could put us up for a couple of months. Because at that time, Shyam Sundar, he was busy getting the Bury Place temple ready. And he was removing supportive walls, and so many different construction work was going on. It became very dangerous to live there. So we had to move out. And so when George asked John if we could stay with him, he immediately agreed. Because that summer, he'd been in the touring the Greek islands on a yacht and chanting Hare Krishna every single day. And in fact, there's even some recordings of that chanting, which might be available through the internet. And so there was a row of gardeners' cottages that we took over. On one side, the brahmacharis lived, and I stayed in a room with Trivikram. Prabhupada stayed in the middle house, and the grihastas stayed on the left side. So Trivikram, as I mentioned, he was Prabhupada's official masseur. And he would get up quite early and prepare himself to go into massage Srila Prabhupada. Now, I had met Prabhupada just the day before. And because I felt a strong connection with Srila Prabhupada, I had asked the devotees, well, when Prabhupada comes to a new place, a new temple, what kind of program do we have? And they said, well, there's kirtan, there's a talk, then there's questions. So I kind of mentally prepared myself now to actually speak to Srila Prabhupada when I got the opportunity. So when he had settled in the middle cottage, the gardener's cottage, and he came to our kirtan hall with our altar, very simple altar. We didn't have a Vyasasan for him because none of us had ever seen a Vyasasan. So we made a dais, which is basically a wooden box with some cushions and some steps to get up onto the dais, and then a place to put the book especially the Prabhupada's books that he was translating at that time. So there was a kirtan that was led by Jamuna. She was sitting on the floor playing harmonium, and Prabhupada went like this with his hands, saying, you dance around in a clockwise direction and have kirtan. So Jamuna was sitting in the middle of this circle, and we were dancing and dancing and having a very nice kirtan, and Prabhupada stopped the kirtan. Then he spoke for about 1 hour, but I was so totally focused on what I wanted to do that I didn't hear a single word of his lecture. The only thing I could hear was after he spoke, he said, any questions? I put my hand up. He saw me with my hand in the air and he said, yes. I said, when can I take initiation? I don't think there were many devotees, even at that time, who were that bold to ask that question. So obviously, that was the first time that Prabhupada heard my voice, and the first time he saw me. So then, after digesting my question, he looked at me and he said, that we will see. So he was not being negative and he wasn't being positive. He just wanted to check me out, obviously. And lo and behold, the next day, when Trivikram was supposed to be up and getting ready to massage Prabhupada, he was still lying in his sleeping bag. And I said, you know, the time is coming, you have to get up and you have to get ready to give Prabhupada a massage. And he says, back to Dave, I don't think I'm well enough to give Prabhupada a massage. I've got terrible toothache. So you'll have to go instead. And I looked at him, I said, would you like to repeat that again? He said, yeah, you'll have to go and massage him. I said, you know, I've never massaged anyone in my life. Now you're asking me to massage the purest soul on the planet, this wonderful personality who's broadcasting the message of Lord Chaitanya. He said, oh, it's dead easy. You start with the head. There's 2 types of oils. There's sandalwood oil, which you use on the head, and there's mustard oil that you use in the rest of the body. And you start with the head, and you'll hear Prabhupada say harder, harder. So you have to do that. You have to give a harder and harder massage. And just keep massaging him until then he says, okay, now you go to the neck, then the back, then the chest, then the arms, then the legs, like this. He said it normally takes about 2.5 hours. Well, no, I was 21 at that time, and I thought, well, I can probably handle that. And so he gave me a gamcha. He gave me 2 bottles of the oils, and he told me where to go. And he said, so you get everything ready, you put down the straw mat in the middle of the room, and you wear a gamcha, and when Prabhupada comes into the room, you pay your obeisances. So I did that. Prabhupada came, and he looked at me, and the first question he asked was, where are you from? I said, from Scotland, Srila Prabhupada. How far is Edinburgh from Glasgow? I said, 400 miles, Srila Prabhupada. How long does it take to go by train? I said, about 8 hours. And then he asked, where were you educated? I said, Scotland, Srila Prabhupada. Did you learn British history? I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada. When was the Battle of Trafalgar? I said, 1805. When was the Battle of Waterloo? I had to think about that when I said, 1815. He said, yes, I learned those things too when I went to school. He said, I also learned the catechism. So he wasn't asking me any philosophical questions because I wasn't at all philosophical. But at least I knew my geography and a little bit of British history. So on that level, Prabhupada made me feel very much at ease. He said, okay, you can start the massage. So he sat down on the straw mat, but before that, he said, the room is very cold. You switch on that electric heater. And there was a 3-bar electric heater in the room. So I switched on 1 bar, and Prabhupada saw it, change color. It's becoming orange, then red. He said, no, all three, not just one. It's very cold. And Prabhupada liked the heat. So I turned on the other two bars, electric bars, and so they said, all right, now you can begin massaging the head. So I was massaging his head, and I was thinking, well, this isn't so difficult. This is quite easy. I could do this for a long, long time. Because I was a little taller than Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada was quite tiny in stature. And but then I realized, because the room was heating up, and I've got a very sweaty body, I started producing sweat. And I kept thinking, and I don't want my sweat to touch Srila Prabhupada's body. That would be a great offense. So then I kind of inched my way from him. I went, a few more, 6 inches, 10 inches. And so it's just like, when you hold a 5-pound bag of flour. If you hold it close to your body, you can hold it quite easily. But if you put your arm out like this, then that 5-pound weight of flour becomes incredibly heavy, and it's very difficult to maintain that bag of flour in your hand, otherwise it'll fall. So that was the way I was feeling too when I was massaging Prabhupada. That it was actually more difficult than I imagined. But I went through the whole procedure of massaging his head, then his neck, then his back. Then he told me to sit in front of me, because I was behind him massaging him. Then he told me to move to the front. Then all of a sudden, he stuck his left arm, his left hand on my knee, and he was holding my knee for support. And I kept thinking, I just met this great personality yesterday, and here I am in this incredibly intimate situation, and he's holding onto my knee, and he wants me to massage his arm up and down, then pull all his fingers. And the same thing with his legs, massaging his legs and pulling his toes. And I thought, what have I done to deserve this? Because I hadn't really done anything. I mean, I bought Prabhupada's books. I came with very little money. I had about £8 to my name. And I bought all of Prabhupada's Bhagavatams that were available at that time, which were the ones printed in Delhi in 1962. The first canto, the first 3 volumes of Srimad Bhagavatam, along with Nectar of Devotion, teachings of Lord Chaitanya, and Bhagavad Gita as it is. But this was the abridged version, the paperback version, which is not printed by the BBT, because the BBT didn't exist in those days. Neither did ISKCON Press. Oh no, ISKCON Press was the one who published Nectar of Devotion and teachings of Lord Chaitanya. So then when I came downstairs, this lasted about 2.5 hours, and I felt quite ecstatic being in his presence for such a long time, just by myself. And Jamuna was waiting for me at the bottom of the stairs, and she said, don't go home yet. She said that the reward for massaging Prabhupada is that you get to relish all of Prabhupada's remnants of his lunch. And you don't need to share them with anyone. So that really resonated with me. And this is called Maha Maha Prasad, but it comes directly from the lips of Krishna's pure devotee. So I relished that 2.5 hours I spent with Srila Prabhupada, and I relished the fact that I was able to receive all his Maha remnants and not share them with anyone and not feel guilty. So when I went back to the room, Trivikram was already up. And I said, you're feeling better? He said, yeah. Why? I said, well, I was really hoping that you'd be able to take over the massage tomorrow. He said, this is just a one-off thing for you. Don't get big-headed. I'm the one who massages Prabhupada, not you. This is just a one-off. That's how devotees speak from Buffalo, New York. I don't know how they speak in Los Angeles, but they're...
Well, we have some Maha Maha Prasadam for you. His Grace Dhananjaya ki.
Anyway, so it just so happened that he got over his toothache and he went in the next day. And he did the same thing that I'd done, massage Prabhupada for 2.5 hours, take Prabhupada's maha, then he came back. But he wasn't looking happy. And I said, Trivikram, what happened? He said, I don't know what you did yesterday, but he doesn't want me just to massage him, he wants both of us to take turns. I mean, I didn't object to that. And there was a Canadian devotee who came to join us called Ishan. Now Ishan, he produced the first mridangas made of fiberglass called, I think, Balaram drums. Yeah, that's the same one, Ishan. He was quite an eccentric character. He also played a trumpet. And he would always play his trumpet on Harinam Sankirtan, which was kind of nice. You know, it was just unusual, but and so many other devotees have come and gone and engaged in Sankirtan. I think right now there's a devotee called Ekalavya who likes to play trumpet as well, and he does the same thing in Harinam. So it's a tradition started by Ishan. But he didn't come just to play his trumpet. He also wanted to beg from Srila Prabhupada the opportunity to massage him. And so he did on a morning walk. We were with Prabhupada on the morning walk, and Ishan boldly spoke up and he said, Srila Prabhupada, I've come all the way from Montreal in Canada with one request, and that is to massage you. And Prabhupada looked at him, said, yes. He said, I already have 2 others massaging, maybe you can join them. So then it was 3 of us taking turns in massaging Srila Prabhupada. But somehow or another, when we moved back to London, we were there for about 2 months. And some interesting things happened during that time. For the first couple of weeks, John Lennon was so into being with Srila Prabhupada and with the devotees. Him and his wife, Yoko Ono, would come for lunch. Now, lunch was served on paper plates, and lunch was served out of big stainless steel buckets, because that was like the tradition that was started in San Francisco and also in New York. And we would sit in little straw mats, but John and Yoko didn't seem to mind, you know, this lowly way of eating, especially when the plate starts collapsing, you know, when you have too many wet subjis, you know. But they kind of tolerated all that. And in fact, John offered to Prabhupada to donate land. On his estate, he had 76 acres of land. And he was willing to donate 6 acres of land for us. Because he actually was thinking we might stay there for an indefinite period, not just for a couple of months. So when Prabhupada heard this, he was very happy. He said, okay, now we can use this land for growing our own vegetables and grains. And he said, and any excess that we cannot use, we can take to that, what is that famous market garden in central London? I said, Covent Garden. He said, yes, Covent Garden. We should take those excess vegetables and grains by bullock cart to central London. And I kind of made eyes at Prabhupada. I said, but Prabhupada, in this country, we don't particularly use bullock carts to move things around. We use lorries. Now, a lorry is a truck, but that's the English word for lorry, truck. And I said, yeah, they have these big lorries, and they drive there very, very fast, and the bullock cart will be lagging behind. He said, no, no, no. He said, just like in India, you set out on your journey the night before. And the bullocks, they walk through the whole night, and you'll get there even before the lorries. He was thinking very far-sighted, very far-sighted. Amazing, you know. He also said that we should start a week-long Ratha Yatra, starting from John Lennon's estate, which is about 25 miles from the center of London. And he said, in every few miles, you should stop in a local town or village, and you have kirtan, and you talk about Lord Chaitanya, and the importance of the holy name. And you have a festival. So in every time you stop like this for a week, you can gradually move towards central London. This was Prabhupada's vision. I mean, he was so convinced that the real way that Krishna consciousness can be accepted by the rest of society is to show to everyone how much we love Krishna and how we love Krishna's animals. And that we use the animals, we don't slaughter the bullocks. Because that was pretty much what was happening in the dairy industry. They would keep the cows, the female cows, but they would slaughter the bulls because there was no use for them. There were no more plows being pulled by bulls and so on. It was all done by mechanical means, by tractors. But Prabhupada's vision already in 1969 was how to establish Varnashram Dharma and how to establish the bull's position in human society. So he was already, you can say, preparing us. Even in 1974, when we invited Srila Prabhupada to come and visit us in Rome, he also talked about the same thing, about using bullock carts. And I asked Prabhupada a question, I remember that we were talking also about the Battle of Kurukshetra, and how many millions of Kshatriyas assembled on that battlefield. There were 340 million on the side of the Kauravas, and 300 million on the side of the Pandavas. 640 million warriors, soldiers came. And they came from all over the world, not just from India. And I asked him, I said, how did they reach Kurukshetra? He said they went by bullock cart, they went by camel, they went by elephant, they went by ship, they went by horse. So he was mentioning all the different types of transport. Didn't mention motor cars or tanks. There was nothing mechanized. It was all done by living, sentient animals. And he said even they came from your country, meaning Scotland. So they came from North America, from South America, from China, from Asia, from Africa. And he said that the way that we can solve this problem of the desire to engage in nuclear warfare, because Prabhupada was very conscious of that too, that there are so many nuclear weapons. And one devotee asked him, he said, you know, we have so many preaching centers in the heart of so many big cities. Should they move into the countryside to save themselves? Prabhupada said, no. Why? He said, of course, these are very expensive nuclear weapons and they'll use them to fall on the major cities. But the devotees, they're always engaged in preaching. So when the nuclear bomb falls on their heads, because they're thinking of Krishna, they go back home, back to Godhead. What is the loss? He said, we'll never close down our preaching centers in the cities. So Prabhupada was like this. He was wanting us to use Krishna consciousness to solve all the problems of the material world. And I know that Yogeshwar Prabhu was talking about that we're not speaking the language of the scientists or the physicists, but we're talking the language of love. Prabhupada actually wanted us to develop love for Krishna as quickly as possible. He said that would be the most pleasing activity for you to develop love for Krishna. So it's through that love for Krishna that we can expand our society and join what we call in Britain the big society. Now I come from a country which is quite small. It's got the same population as this state of California, just over 60 million. But already in our tiny little country, there are so many people who are practicing Krishna consciousness. We have a congregation of at least 500,000, just for the manor, Bhaktivedanta Manor. Or to speak of Soho Street. For a typical Ratha Yatra festival, we have as many as 85,000 people. they come to attend our Janmashtami festival. And they'll wait in line for up to 2 or 3 hours just to have darshan of Radha Gokulananda and Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman. And that number of people means there has to be quite a number of cars. In fact, the average number of cars that people use to come to Bhaktivedanta Manor is about 25,000 cars. But somehow or another we've been able to expand our land. We have 77 acres of land. And so that kind of accommodates around about 25,000 cars. And of course, Goraksh, cow protection. This is something that Prabhupada emphasized like anything over and over again. Not just protecting the bull, but protecting Gomata. So we have what's known as 5-star facilities for our cows. It's called New Gokula. We have about 70 cows, and that facility we raised just over £2 million for looking after the cows. And of course we got donations for the approach road to the manor, because the manor is still within this green belt area. And just recently the local council has awarded us with planning permission for a 2,000 square meter footprint of assembly hall and prasadam hall. So 2,000 square meters is about 18,000 square feet, because you multiply by 9, 1 meter. So it's, and of course now we're in the stage of collecting those funds. The most recent estimate for the cost of such a project is about £8 million. So we've had visits from so many politicians, so many town mayors, so many other religious groups, and of course we have a George Harrison Memorial Garden. I think it's the only one that exists in the West. And that was opened by the widow of George Harrison, Olivia Harrison, a couple of years ago. And it's a very popular place for people who are not of Indian origin. Of course, we have many, many pious Hindus living in the UK, but I think there's also many, many pious Hindus living here in California. So anything's possible. And of course, Prabhupada's vision was always far and beyond our vision. Now you saw also a photograph of George Harrison with Srila Prabhupada. I'm also in that photograph, but it's been snipped out. The reason I'm in that photograph is that Prabhupada actually wanted me to represent him, to visit George Harrison and ask him if he'd like to help find us a bigger property, because in the early 1970s all we had was Berry Place. And so I used to walk from Radhalandanishwara's temple to the Apple Studios, the Apple building in Savile Road. Took about 15 minutes. And I never went empty-handed. I'd always bring special Mahaprasad. And I can tell you what his favorite items were. He loved deep-fried cheese and potato sabji soaked in sour cream. He had a very rich palate, you can say. He loved cauliflower and peas samosas. He loved malpoa, malpoa, which is a very sweet South Indian dish. He loved strawberry flavored buttermilk nectar. He loved puris. He loved eggplant pakoras. He loved Simply Wonderfuls and Burfi. So I would bring lots and lots of these different preparations, and he would also say, you know, I'm trying to get my friends into practicing Krishna consciousness. Could you bring along some Bhagavad Gitas? So that's what I would do. I'd bring in Bhagavad Gitas and he would distribute to his professional friends. He also made an album called Living in a Material World. You might have seen the documentary. Yeah, it was a very popular documentary. And so that album was also very, very popular. And the way he paid for the manor was he used all the profits from that particular album were used to pay for Bhaktivedanta Manor. The place was sold at the rate of £220,000 in those days. And he actually was thinking that he wanted to have like a double album. On one side there'd be the vinyl LP, on the other side he wanted it to be like a little box containing a bead bag and japa beads and instructions how to use the bead bag and the beads. But the manufacturer of the sleeves of the album said because the beads were made of wood and that they were irregular in size, they might cause the vinyl to break. So, but then of course what he did was he put a big picture from the BBT of Krishna and Arjuna on the chariot at the Battle of Kurukshetra. And he dedicated one of the tracks on that album, one track called "The Lord Loves the One Who Loves the Lord," and that was dedicated to Srila Prabhupada. And when we went out to his place, Friar Park, that was in the evening, and when he came into Prabhupada's presence, because we had been in Reading. Reading is a nearby town, Reading Town Hall. We had a program there. We drove over to Friar Park. And as soon as he saw Prabhupada, he paid his obeisances full, like a stick. He fell at the feet of Srila Prabhupada like a stick. And he would always come with a big bouquet of flowers and a huge basket of fruit. And so when I was given this opportunity to associate with George and meet him downstairs in his recording studio, he would say sometimes, jokingly, he said, you know, you're costing me thousands and thousands of pounds just by coming here. I said, why is that? He said, well, because when you come here, I don't get any recording done. We just sit down, talk about Prabhupada and talk about Bhagavad Gita. They said, don't worry, I like it. I like the way we use our time. And then I said to him, I said, you know, you love Prabhupada so much, why don't you take a Krishna name? And he said, oh, there's no need. I said, why? He said, I already have a Krishna name. Hari son of Hari. So you couldn't argue with that. Son of Hari. So, I mean, these were very intimate moments, I have to say. And of course, I did bring up the subject. And because he asked me, he said, so how's everything in Berry Place? I said, oh, I think we're doing too well. He said, what do you mean too well? I said, well, we've got so many boys and girls who want to come and live with us. We've run out of space. Sometimes there's, you know, some of these guests are sleeping on the roof of our neighbor's house. And I said, oh, by the way, would you like to help us find a bigger property? He said, sure. I would be honored. This is the word he used. I will be honored to help you find a bigger place. So then I said, well, how do I do that? What do I do? He said, well, close to Savile Row, there's this Hanover Square, and it's full of estate agents, which I think you call real estates, right? Realtors? Realtors. They're called estate agents. And he said, you go there and you find out what's on their files. You make an appointment. You go out with their representative, And then you let me know the details. So I did that. I did that a couple of times. The first place was this old Polish convent full of Polish nuns, but not many Polish congregation. So the Vatican had decided they'd want to sell this property, and it was being sold for £125,000. So I went there the first time with the surveyor, and they had no idea who I was. I was with a shaved head, Sikha, Kurta, Dhoti, Vaishnav Tilak. And so we walked around, and it looked like it was devotee-proof. It had really thick walls, and it was quite well constructed, and reasonably cheap, and close to London. So I called George, and I said, all right, this is a place that they have in their books, and I think this would serve our purposes. It was on a 22-acre estate. So he said, all right, let me know when I can come and pick you up at the temple, and we'll drive out there together, and I'll check it out. So that's what he did. He came with his bead bag, because we didn't have clickers in those days, we just had beads and bead bags. And it was a Porsche sports car. He came in, and whenever we'd stop at the traffic lights and someone would look in the car and recognize him, and they'd, you know, almost like faint, he'd say, chant Hare Krishna and be happy. Get off the material platform, get off the bodily platform. Which I thought was, again, very bold of him to do that, you know. And he was showing his allegiance to chanting Hare Krishna. And so then we got to the place, and of course, the surveyor recognized him, and he went back and reported to his superiors who was actually funding this sale. And we have this system called gazumping. I don't know if you have that system here. When you gazump, it means that you want to get as much money out of the buyer as possible. So you make all these excuses. There's another party. They're putting in a higher offer. Do you want to counter offer? So George didn't like that at all. And that happened with 8 different properties. And time was going on. It was now coming into Christmas time. Then we found out about this Pigot's Manor, and that was from another estate agent on Bayswater Road, near to Kensington Gardens, central London. And it was for £220,000. So as usual, I called George, and I said, you know, we have this property, it's 17 acres of land, it's 10,000 square foot of house. Would you like me to make an appointment so you can come and visit? And he said, well, this time I can't make it. I have an appointment in Los Angeles with the other Beatles. We're going to be talking about the future of the Apple company, the recording company. So I'll be with John and Ringo and Paul. And I won't be back for at least 6 months. He said, don't worry. I trust your judgment. How much is this place being sold for? I said, £220,000. He said, okay. It'll take that long anyway to, you know, for the whole proceedings of transferring the deeds to you and so on and so forth. He said, so I'll give you the name and the phone number of my lawyer, and you work with him. But on one condition, you don't pay a penny above the asking price of £220,000. So anyway, we make the offer through the lawyer, and a few weeks later, the estate agent calls me and he said, oh, you know, we have this sheikh from Dubai and his 8 wives. They've looked at this house, and they have the money in their hand, and they're willing to pay a premium price. Are you willing to offer something higher than the £220,000? I said, no. I've been given strict instructions. We're going to pay £220,000 and not a penny more. And the guy says, well, I really like you to get this property. I don't want this sheikh to get it. Are you sure? Because this is something you really have to reconsider. I said, all right, give me a week to think about it. So then another week went by, he calls me, and he said, so, are you willing to increase your offer? I said, no. We are not going to pay a penny above the asking price of £220,000. So I stuck to my promise to George. Then a week later he calls and said, well, I think you're going to get this property now because the sheikh has decided to pull out. His wives thought the place was too small for them, so they're not going for it anymore. So, and that's how we got the manor. Oops. Now for 7 years, this property didn't belong to ISKCON. He had set up this foundation called the Material World Charitable Foundation. And it was that foundation who bought the property. So when we used to approach these rich Indians to help us with building a car park or whatever, they would say, well, who owns the deeds? And we had to say, well, actually, it's George Harrison's foundation. And they said, well, you don't have any sort of written contract? No, not a piece of document, not a piece of parchment paper with any kind of agreement. So then they would say, well, if that's the case, you could be thrown out any day, because we were paying what's known as a peppercorn rent. In England, they have this old system where the cheapest property that you can pay with is 6 peppercorns. Not pennies, not pounds, peppercorns. Because in the 1300s, peppercorns were considered more valuable than gold. So that's where we get that saying, a peppercorn rent, which in 1973 came out to being about £10 a year. So we paid £10 a year for 7 years without any documentation. And then the temple president at that time, he called me, he knew my closeness to George, and he said, would you like, on behalf of the temple, to approach George and ask him if he could give us some legal binding document, like a lease, or can we purchase the place? And this is completely off the record. But what he did was, because I did actually get him to come over, we spent 2.5 hours walking around the grounds, and he said, you know, when I got this property, I wanted you guys just to have it to yourself. But legally, I can't sell, a foundation can't sell a valuable property to a charity. There has to be some exchange of funds. And he said, this is what I've agreed to do. I will put another £145,000 towards the sale of this place if you can come up with 45,000. So it's a total of £190,000. It will look like you've paid just under £30,000 because the original sale was £220,000. So he actually contributed not only £220,000, he paid another £145,000 just because he promised me and he promised Prabhupada that he'd find us a nice place. Now, not many people know that part of the story. But that's what he did. And of course, I went to 2 banks. I went to Barclays Bank and Lloyds Bank, and I got an appraiser to come, a valuer to come to check out the value of the property. This is in 1980, 7 years after we moved in 1973. And the property was valued at £1.5 million. So then it was easy to raise the £45,000 loan. Then in 1980, it became ISKCON property.
Can we ask you what was Srila Prabhupada's participation in that whole exchange during that time?
Well, his participation was, we actually went with George and Prabhupada to see another property. It was a place called Runnymede Farm, very close to where the Magna Carta was signed on the River Thames. It's a very, very historical place. And it's interesting, I'll tell you what Prabhupada, his take on the thing, because I was going to mention that, you know, the way that Prabhupada dealt with all of us was like, for want of a better way to put it, like a Vaidurya stone. He had so many facets to his amazing personality. He engaged with us one-on-one. You know, it was something that even I remember many classes that Prabhupada gave when there was hundreds of devotees, and it felt like he was talking to you personally. And that sound was resonating within the heart of us all. So, you know, Prabhupada, he knew that George was very much surrendered to Krishna consciousness. But he gave him another opportunity to completely surrender, because we walked around this 120-acre estate, and it was full of thorns. It was overgrown. It hadn't been used as a farm for 5 years. And George, with his typical Liverpudlian humor, he said, they shouldn't call this Runnymede Farm, they should call it Runny Down Farm. Because it's completely run down, except for the big house. And we went to the big house. I had the key in my pocket, and I wanted to show Prabhupada inside and the potential for a temple and so on. But he stopped. He stopped dead. And then we gathered round Prabhupada, right next to the house, with the big columns. And he said, so, here we will build a bank. And there was one elderly devotee called Bhakti Pramod. He was in his late 50s. He worked for a very big English bank as a security manager. and he pointed his walking stick to Bhakti Pramod, and he said, after this bank has been completed, you will be the bank manager. Because you know about banks, because you work for this big bank company. Then he pointed his walking stick to George, and he said, and you will deposit all of your money in that bank. And we will spend it in spreading Krishna consciousness. So he gave George that opportunity to completely and totally surrender all his material wealth. Of course, he was taken aback at that, because he was already agreeing to help us anyway to find a property. But just see, Prabhupada was acting in such an amazingly detached way. He was seeing, if this is what he can do, then he will go back home, back to Godhead. Of course, there's no question that George went back home, back to Godhead, because even Prabhupada said later on, in 1977 in Vrindavan, there was a special place in his heart for George Harrison. And he had just received a very, very expensive ring, a blue sapphire ring from Guru Kripa. Now that ring had cost him, in Hong Kong, where he purchased the ring, $25,000. But he had spent that much because some fortune teller or some, you know what you call them? Psychic, yeah, let's call him a psychic. This Chinese psychic, maybe he had something to do with the sale of the ring too, you never know, convinced him that he should buy this and that Prabhupada's health would improve. So Prabhupada was wearing this ring practically on his deathbed. But he took off that very costly ring, and he said to Tamal Krishna, make sure George Harrison gets this ring. That's where it went. And you know, I saw George when I went to visit him at Friar Park after that, when Prabhupada left. He was wearing that ring, that blue sapphire ring. So none of the GBC men ended up with it, I can assure you. You want to hear some more? Okay. All right.
The time you were getting the manor, was Prabhupada informed of the various stages, what was going on, or the years, or that it wasn't in our name? Did he have any feedback on that?
No, he came to see it. In fact, he installed Radha Gokulananda on Janmashtami 1973 at Bhaktivedanta Manor.
Right, and that was before it was in our name.
Oh yeah, I mean it didn't come into ISKCON's name until 1980. That's how much confidence Prabhupada had in George Harrison not breaking his promise. And there's film of that, I'm sure all of you have seen, where it's the one and only time that Prabhupada allows all of us who are not, Brahmin clean, to enter into the deity room and circumambulate the deities inside the deity room. That was a one-off thing. That never happened anywhere else. Okay, here's a very personal thing, but I think tomorrow I'm supposed to speak something. So, but okay. This is something that I decided myself. Now this is very, very dangerous territory. When you decide to do something without consulting with Prabhupada, right? It's like, you know, if you get chastised by Prabhupada, that's also a special type of mercy. But you have to be quite thick-skinned to tolerate. So what happened was that, this is again in 1975, Krishna Balaram Mandir, we had this bell, this arti bell, which was right in the darshan mandap, in front of Krishna Balaram's altar. And this bell used to be rung like anything. And it was rung so hard one evening that the bell fell and it crashed into the marble. And you can even today see the indentation this bell made, and it's just broke into many pieces. So I came up with this brilliant idea, I thought, that instead of having the next bell in that place, because it could be dangerous, it could hit somebody on the head, again, possibly, I said, Prabhupada, I've bought this bell, and it was like a 40-kilo bell, 40-kilo weight, almost 100 pounds in weight, for 3,000 rupees from Lai Bazaar. And I was so proud of this bell, I had 2 workers bring the bell into Prabhupada's darshan room in his house. You know, either end of a big bamboo pole. And Prabhupada wanted to hear the sound. So I rang the bell. He said, this is a very nice bell. Hang it in the tree. Because, you know, there's a special tree growing in Krishna Balaram courtyard. It's a tamal tree, exactly. And there are very few tamal trees in Raman Reti at that time. And I looked at Prabhupada. I said, Prabhupada, that tree is so small and so weak, it won't be able to sustain the weight of the bell. He said, no, hang it in the tree. I said, Prabhupada, I've got some other idea. He said, what is that idea? Well, above the main entrance, there's a perfect belfry. There's a place which seems to have just been made for hanging a bell. And I want to hang it there. And he said, you can hang that bell any damn place you want, but I want it hung in the tree. Guess what? I didn't hang it in the tree. So I hung it in that belfry, which today is that's the place where the Krishna Balaram temple bell is situated. And so then Prabhupada said, I've got an idea. This bell should not only be rung at arti times. It should be rung on the hour, every hour, day and night. And you should get the local chokidars to ring the bell. And if they don't ring the bell, you have to ring the bell. He said, the reason I want this bell to be rung on the hour, every hour, is because the local people are very poor and they can't afford to buy wristwatches. And they don't know what the time is. So we will provide them with the proper time. And also, of course, it can be rung during arti time. All right, so then we had this arrangement. I spoke with the chokidars. We had, at that time, they were on 12-hour shifts, from 7 in the morning till 7 at night, from 7 at night till 7 in the morning. And he said, also, if the bell is not rung by the chokidar, we'll know that he's sleeping. Then you have to go and wake him up. So I thought, well, have I made a mistake here or what? But I couldn't get out of it. I couldn't get out of it. And it was a few days later, I was in the ashram with Prabhupada's servant Upendra, 2 o'clock in the morning, just after 2. I hear this banging. You know, like in the cartoons when you got a big fist and the door's kind of bulging? You know, that's what it sounded like. It was bulging inside, not outside. And I thought, what on earth is going on? So I opened the door, and there was Brahmananda. Brahmananda was Prabhupada's secretary. He said, Prabhupada wants to see you. I said, do I have time to put on my dhoti? No, you come in your gamcha. So that's how, again, you know, he's from New York. You know, you've got to excuse him. I'm trying not to offend anybody from New York, by the way. But that's, I know that, yeah, right? You're from New York? You're both from New York? Oh yeah, Rameshwar Prabhu. Hare Krishna, sorry. Anyway, so I go, and he just turns and walks down the stairs, and I come down the stairs with him. I thought there was some like major catastrophe has happened, you know, like somebody died or fell off a building or who knows. And so then I go down the stairs and I go up the stairs because Prabhupada's bedroom was above his darshan room in that house that Srila built for him in between the temple and the guest house. So I go there and I pay my obeisances. And as I'm paying my obeisances, Prabhupada says in a loud voice, "You did not hear?" And I thought, what has he heard? And I said, "No, Prabhupada, that is the difficulty. I did not hear either. The bell is not being rung. Immediately go and ring the bell." He was winning on point. Okay, there's just one little story. This is also to do with Krishna Balaram Temple, because lots of things happened during those first couple of years, 1975, 76, 77. You know, there's two rooms. As you enter into the Krishna Balaram Temple, there is what's now where they have the prasadam and the books. So in those days, we didn't have it built outside the rooms. We just had the two rooms, and we'd serve prasadam from the left-hand side, and we'd have books on the other side, the right-hand side. And so we had spent some money in getting nice mattresses and white sheets and bolsters and a big bookcase, you know, beautifully lit up with different colored lights to display Prabhupada's books. And I was kind of proud that we had done that. That was quite an achievement, you know, and we thought that, and because Prabhupada had never seen it, we wanted him to see it. So I asked him, can we come back 15 minutes early from the morning walk? And by the way, Prabhupada insisted I go on every single morning walk, whether I wanted to or didn't want to, which is also quite difficult sometimes, because when you're the temple president, there's so many things that are happening over here and over there, and you know, I get waylaid, and Prabhupada would refuse to move until I showed up. And they would all be looking at their watches, because I was, you know, most of the time I was late. And I was like, I'm not just holding up Prabhupada, I'm holding up all the GBC men and the sannyasis and the BBT trustees. But there were amazing walks anyway. So, you know, this morning I happened to be on time, so I felt good about it. And I thought, Prabhupada, can we come back 15 minutes early? Because there's something I want to show you. He said, okay. Didn't ask what it was, he just said, okay. So then we come in. It's 7:15. We go to the book room, and we put a chair for Prabhupada to sit on in the middle of the room. And I said, Prabhupada, what do you think of this room? We put new mattresses with beautiful pure white sheets and bolsters and your books and everything. And we're hoping to make many, many life members. So Prabhupada sits in the chair. And without saying anything else, he says, illicit sex. And I went, what? Illicit. And it just so happened that the GBC for Vrindavan, Gopal Krishna, happened to be standing right next to me. And we look at each other and we go, did something happen in the guest room that we know? That's, what's Prabhupada talking about? Illicit sex? That's all he said. Illicit sex. Then Prabhupada says, and he's moving his cane, his walking stick, and it's going up. And we're following the tip of the walking stick, and we're looking straight up. And it's about maybe 18 feet high, the ceiling, and there's a ceiling fan. And two pigeons had made a nest on the ceiling fan. He said, this is illicit sex. You're thinking everything here is so nice. The bookcase is nice, you know, the bolsters and the mattresses and everything else is nice. But that is not Krishna consciousness. Krishna conscious means you see everything, everything, including the two pigeons having illicit sex on top of the fan. So don't leave anything to chance. Prabhupada said this a couple of times about how when you're Krishna conscious, there's nothing that you can't see. You can see everything. Something to look forward to. So we'll finish. There's any questions or comments so far?
Okay, so we're going to take questions, and I would like to have first questions, prashnas. Then we'll take comments. Please.
Thank you. I just wanted to know the details because I heard that you looked at another property that was very luxurious and things like that, and then George disapproved of that. Can you tell us more about it, if I remember well?
Yeah, this is a property we looked at together just outside of the city of Oxford, in Oxfordshire. It was a health club, but it was a 5-star health club. They had hosepipe treatment, mud treatment, sauna treatment. They had a huge conservatory where they served all the salads and the soups. There was an indoor Olympic-size heated pool. It was £330,000. £330,000. It came with 150 acres. It was a really beautiful property. So George looked at it and he said, I thought you people were supposed to be renunciates. He said, I know if I lived here, I'd fall down immediately. This isn't meant for you guys. So I wrote that to Prabhupada. What he said, because I had to report directly from Prabhupada what happened with all these different properties. And Prabhupada was getting really annoyed. He said, we have to strike while the iron is hot. Don't let the iron get cold. Because, we were looking for like 6 months. We started like in May, June, and this is now in December, January. But then in January of 1972, this is, in 73, that's when this property, the manor, Piggott's Manor, came up on the market. So. He just said you didn't deserve to get this property. So that's why because it was also expensive. It was $330,000, and George had bought Friar Park for $138,000, and that was, a very luxurious, very eccentric house built by Sir Frank Crisp, who was an eccentric Victorian millionaire. He made all the switches into monks' faces, and the actual switch was their nose. Little things like that, Okay.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So, I spent 8 years in England, and I had the occasion to visit George. And after his passing, I was always curious why it wasn't more public about his devotion, in his participation in Krishna consciousness and his love for Srila Prabhupada, because it was so public about Maharishi, and the Beatles. And yet there just wasn't much about his connection with Krishna consciousness.
Well, he was very philosophical. You heard, I'm sure you saw that video with, Yogeshwar's presentation. He was actually quite a shy person. He didn't broadcast what he did. In fact, he told me, he said, when I gave you the manor, there's about 5 different huge charities, WWF, Save the Whales, so many, of these, established worldwide charities. We're going to him and saying, why have you given to the Hare Krishnas? They're nothing. I mean, what do they have to show for themselves? We're worldwide societies, Greenpeace, and so on and so forth, and Amnesty International. And George said, that was my choice. My choice was to be with the Hare Krishnas, not with you guys. So, he really wanted to separate himself. But what he did say, I have to add this a little bit. There's like a little anecdote. In 1997, when we got the official planning permission to put in the road, that was during the time of John Major. John Major was still the Prime Minister, and it was his Minister of the Environment. He gave the permission, under duress, but he gave the permission anyway. And George said, because we had this huge big victory dinner, and him and his wife, Olivia, came to that victory dinner. Shamsundar was there, Mukunda was there. Mukunda presented him with a little murti of Prabhupada sitting on a Vyasasan. And he said, you know, after this, everybody spoke in the room. We were having this amazing dinner. And even Olivia got up. She was the second last to speak. And she said, I can see how many nice, good friends my husband has got from his experience with Krishna consciousness. Because she was always very negative. You know, she was a Guru Maharaji freak. You know, she was a premi. No, Guru Maharaji. Look him up. You can Google him. And so he said, after my wife just spoke, I have to say something. I wasn't going to say anything, but I feel I have to say something. He said, I've been watching through the media, on television, newspapers, and so on, all the problems you're facing, because it was an uphill struggle to get the planning permission from John Selwyn Gummer. But then when it came in 1997, because this campaign lasted from 1982 up until 1997, so it was 15 years. And we spent over £1.5 million on legal fees, because we had to get a QC, a Queen's Counsellor, because that's what the council had. And they charged like £1,500 an hour. Anyway, so then he said, I was always thinking in the back of my mind, if it didn't work out here, you could all move over to Friar Park and take that over as your temple. And we were just blown away that he would even think like that. Of course, his wife was giving some strange looks. But it was absolutely amazing. That's how stalwart he was in spreading Krishna consciousness. I was asked by the GBC to approach George and get his official permission that we could use his name while distributing books on the street. And what he said was, he said, as long as you don't pocket the money, that it goes to printing more of Prabhupada's books, you've got my 100% approval. But if it's going in your pocket, forget it. He was, down to earth.
One last question. And Dhananjaya will be speaking again tomorrow morning, sometime during the hours of 11:30 to 12.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. I'm Anava Jyangi. I first met you here in New Dwarka in the 70s. And I had heard that you were one of the ones to be with George on his deathbed, along with Guru Das and...
Nobody was at his bedside when he
Nobody?
left. No, they all missed it.
Sham Sundar?
They were kind of moving into Nishringananda's pyramid house at that time.
Wow.
Wasn't it?
What happened was they were going every day. It was going on for about 10 days. They decided to take one day off.
Yeah. To move to... Is it?
Wow.
From the... they had a hotel room or something like that? They were staying with you. Okay. So nobody, no devotee. But he had Radhakrishna deities that Svavas brought with Tadit, and also pictures from upstairs, Panchatattva. And because when they went there for the first time, Shamsundar and Mukunda, it wasn't Gurudas, it was Mukunda and Shamsundar. It was Olivia, she got in touch with Mukunda saying, my husband wants you to be at his bedside, please come. And when they went there, all there was pictures of Yogananda and his guru. What was his name? The Baba? Baba. Yeah, Babaji. So there weren't any other pictures of Krishna and Lord Chaitanya or anything like that. But that's what they did. They made sure all those things were put in his room. Then he died.
There's so many examples. Tribhuvanath, Prabhu, and so many examples of devotees who, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, so many devotees who passed in what we would consider not auspicious or particularly auspicious as we would like circumstances, but we all understand that there is no loss or diminution on the path, and that everybody is going to gain whatever Krishna decides for them based on what they've done in their devotional service. So the fact that he left the way he left, really we can only speculate and look at all the wonderful stories and support that he did during his life. That all goes into his spiritual bank account. But it can't begin to compare, in my mind anyway, with Dhananjaya's contributions, his wife's contributions. We hope we'll hear from her tomorrow, Balagopal. And we're just in awe that you're here. I'm so grateful for you to share your stories with us and for you to be present with us. We hope that this will be not the last time. Let's all hear a Hari Bol for His Grace Dhananjaya Prabhu. So now it's time for prasad, finally. Hare Krishna. I think there's some samosas.